Happy Friday, guys. You know what time it is? It is time for our Heat Press for Profit podcast. So welcome to the Heat Press for Profit podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen and join in on conversations. If you're watching with us live on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, make sure you shout out who you are, where you're tuning in from, and of course, we'd love to see your business name. This podcast is designed to have conversations with apparel decorators just like you and industry experts that can have an impact on your business. Now, our guest today, I know you can see him. He's on this side for me. So it's kind of spoiling with his face, but let me tell you a little bit about this guy before I tell you who it is. Now, he has been in the apparel business for 14 years, and he spent 13 years in the sign industry. He's a branding expert with a graphic design background, and our guest today is Skip Davis, the owner of D4 Graphics. Skip, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We've already talked that today is already busy for both of us, so this means a lot that you have reserved about 30 minutes for all of our viewers and for this channel. Tell everybody just a little bit about your business. I know I kind of took a little bit of your thunder by saying, you were a branding expert in all the years, but give us just a little bit more.
So again, my company is D4 Graphics, and we've been printing apparel and helping businesses, clubs, brand their identity to the public with clothing, some promotional items, but mostly clothing, and obviously my specialty, headwear, which has become a super big business venture for a lot of decorators over the last, even since COVID, I want to say it really has taken off. And in my eyes, the hats have become more so of your promo giveaway item that t-shirts were 10 years ago. You have a nice hat with a nice logo. People are going to tend to wear that more often, especially if they're a hat person, than they are if you give them a t-shirt. They're going to wear the t-shirt once. It's going to go in their closet, and it's probably never going to be seen again and be donated to give away. But 14 years in the business. Like you said, I spent 13 years in the sign business, worked for one of the biggest sign shops on the East Coast that's located here in Pittsburgh. Worked my way around that business, ran CNC machines, ran lasers, did some design work, some production work, some assembly work, but ultimately I was sought after there for, we'll call it innovating or trying to determine how to build some of the signs that we worked on. The project managers had a good idea of what we wanted, but then they would bring us the specs and the drawings, and most of the time they would end up in my lap to determine what was the best way to build these signs, most cost effective, less materials, and just all around streamline the process. Because when we're building new buildings, you're talking 600-700 signs for the interior, let alone the exterior, and my portion was the interior signage.
So the thing that you mentioned the most, which for those of you that are watching or listening, if you are in the Heat Press for Profit group, you know that Skip is not shy in showing what he's working on or showing what he's created, or even just kind of troubleshooting, or this is one way to do it, here's another. And you just heard him say that he was kind of that go-to person to find a solution. So today's topic, we are navigating through challenges, reviewing tips and tricks, and we are going to talk about design. We're going to talk about application, innovation, and really just kind of understanding who you can be as an apparel decorator. So Skip, I want to start really kind of from the beginning to the end when it comes to taking on an order. So I want to start with design. Now, when we talked, you mentioned that your design software you use is a little different than what I would say the standard is in the apparel industry. But tell us how you started with design, the program that you use, and really kind of anything that you learned along the way in terms of what else is out there.
Sure. So I want to say a couple days ago, somebody posted on the Heat Press for Profit group, what design software was everybody using? Was it Illustrator better than Corel? And everybody has what they like, and I want to believe that you get accustomed to using what you were first shown. Um, when I was in art school, we used Illustrator and Photoshop. But once I got into the sign business, the software is different. It's not cut and dry Illustrator, Corel Draw. We used a program called FlexiSign. Now, there's many versions of FlexiSign. There's like FlexiSign, FlexiSign Pro, Master, all these different variations, and it just changes the tools that are at your fingertips on the program. So I was using Flexi in the sign world, and I was started my clothing decorating 3 years prior to leaving the sign business. So I was kind of double duty. I was working 8 hours at the sign shop, then coming home and working in my basement to build my clientele before I ultimately left. So when I left, I needed to make sure all my files would convert over to my business from what I had stored on my work computer. So it was just natural for me to go into working with Flexi instead of Illustrator or Corel. Now, Flexi will handle import and exporting your AI, your EPS, that is an Illustrator based file extension. So I don't have many issues with files and artwork because Flexi kind of handles the best of both worlds. And that's what I like to tell people is kind of does a little bit of Illustrator, kind of does a little bit of Corel, and I find that it works great. And actually, I don't even have Illustrator or Corel Draw in my shop.
And you are a graphic artist, which I think is so interesting from your perspective, because I feel like most graphic artists, right, it's either Illustrator, or even Dan Clement has been talking more about the Affinity Designer, and then Corel. But for you, somebody that's so innovative, you're working on a completely different software, and there's not really one that is right or wrong. It's really about what you feel most comfortable with and what right? Like if somebody were to say, hey, you're going to have to turn around and switch to Illustrator, how would that make you feel right now?
It would be tough for me because I'm not very proficient in Illustrator because I haven't used Illustrator in 30 years, which, and we all know those 30 years, that's Illustrator has come a long way. So it would be a challenge. I would have to, it would be a challenge because most of my files are Flexi files. They're not an Illustrator file, which I'm not sure if Illustrator will import Flexi the way Flexi imports Illustrator. So, I mean, if my cloud-based Flexi crashed and was going to be down, let's say it was going to be down for 2 weeks, I probably would have a 2 week vacation because I wouldn't know where to turn or what to do. So yeah, it would be tough, but in the same respects, having one that I know really well, I'm pretty quick on the draw when it comes to being able to design on the fly or just getting it done without hours spent on the computer. I don't like spending lots of time on the computer. It's one of the things that I dislike the most of my job. Luckily, a lot of the clients that I have do provide me with good, clean artwork, but we all know it never happens all the time.
Right.
So there is hours and hours weekly spent on the computer cleaning up, regenerating, just prepping customers' artwork to get it ready for production.
And I think that's another key topic, is having software that gives you the ability to prep it. There's a lot of great programs that Stahls and Transfer Express offers for those to be able to, design without having a design background, which is me. I have thoughts, but I have no idea how to execute them on Corel, Affinity, or Illustrator. So I have to do my best with what I know I can use, or I'm reaching out to the artist to get it done. But for you, if somebody is really wanting a unique type of branding element and you need to be able to add to that artwork, it's best to have that art design software, because you can go in and make the adjustments, make the changes, and just make that logo that they've provided to you even better. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as apparel decorators. And as you grow in your business, you're going to have to eventually teach yourself design software if you want to really become that branding expert.
Yeah, and I believe strongly too that, like you said, it's just gonna benefit you in the long run if you're taking it from a side hustle or a craft standpoint to a full time gig. Um, you really need to invest in some good software. I know it's not cheap, but in the long run, it's just going to benefit you tremendously because let's say you have a friend that helps you with your software. You rely on some of the techs at Transfer Express or Stahls. What happens if it's the weekend
Right.
and a customer says, "Hey, I need this job done ASAP, and that requires some artwork done to it," and you can't get help from anybody else until Monday, but
Right.
you have time on the weekend, but because you don't have a program or the know-how to do it, that kind of puts you behind the eight ball a little bit. And I find that I design around the application that I'm perceiving in my head. I'll look at the logo, look at the design, look at the elements of what the job or order calls for, and will formulate in my head how it's going to be broken down. Are we going to use color max? Are we going to use block? Are we going to use foam? Are we going to use HTV? Prior to doing any design work. That way, I know my color separations and everything like that, where it has to fall into place to make it seamless once the artwork is done and ready to rock and roll. There's no second guessing as to, okay, I got the artwork. Now how are we going to do this? I go the opposite way, and that may be from the sign business because we're just given schematics of what the sign looks like, and sometimes not even what substrates we're going to use. It's just size. Here's the elements. What's the best way to build the sign? And I think I take that approach when I'm doing apparel or hats or anything like that. Is what's going to be the best application, and how do we design around that best application, not just willy-nilly taking the logo, sending it off for Ultra Color Max, and then while that Ultra Color Max is getting produced, worry about how I'm going to create the background portion of the flocker foam to fit the Ultra Color Max that I just sent out. All that's predetermined for me before the Ultra Color Max is even sent out. My files are pulled apart. They're one whole logo, but then they're pulled apart. This is for soft flocker foam. This is for Ultra Color Max. This is for HTV. That way nothing changes. As long as the Ultra Color Max comes the right size, I don't have to worry about it because I've already got everything all laid out, everything ready to go on the plotter that needs to be cut prior to submitting any part of that job to an outhouse agency like Stahls, or if I'm cutting everything in-house. I'm very OCD when it comes to having things in place prior to production. And even as far as cutting stuff and having everything weeded out and laid out, I'll take the extra time to put thermal tape on everything and lay everything out on my table, which people have seen. I've posted pictures of it. That way, my mind doesn't have to worry about that once I get into pressing or doing production. It's all you have to do is be zoned in on what you're doing versus, I only got 10 of these cut, but I got 20 hats. We'll do these 10, and then we'll go cut 10 more, and then we'll come back and weed those out, and then we'll do that. Some people like to do that because it breaks up the monotony. I don't. I like to have everything prepped all at once and ready to go. And that goes back to the design aspect of it. I like having everything thought about ahead of time before any of that happens.
I think it's really interesting because for someone of your branding expertise, and I'm going to call it branding expertise because the stuff I've seen you produce, the logo on the hat you're wearing now, I just love how you take things next level. And sometimes it can be this most simple thing that really enhances or elevates the customer's logo or what they're really wanting to do. And I think that speaks volumes to who you are as a branding expert. But what was key to me is how particular you are in the prep work, the front end of everything. If you're going to be layering 3 different products or 5 layers, 6 layers, 3 layers, 2 layers, whatever it is, you've got that all set up in the very beginning, not as everything is starting to come in. You've done the prep work, and you know how that order is going to be going through production. And I think that is huge for those that are really kind of wanting to go next level with designs or playing with layering media. Is you got to be prepped in the beginning, because once you start cutting everything and then you've got to keep that organized on what layer is next, it's not just at the press where you have to be organized. You have to be organized in the front end or front as well. Now, we did have a question from Sean. Are XP Pen artist tablets as a beneficial investment for graphic designers that create apparel art as well? They seem to work well with mainstream graphic art software. Hesitant to pull the trigger. Do you have any thoughts?
So I have a really good friend who is a senior designer at a design firm here in Pittsburgh. He handles mostly web design, content design, and stuff like that. Very awesome graphic designer as well. He's my go-to. He's a good friend of mine. He's my go-to if I have file extension problems or people send me weird stuff, because people build logos weird ways. They layer, they trap, flatten them, put them on one layer, and it just becomes a nightmare. He uses Procreate. I know a lot of people are familiar with Procreate. I don't have anything like that on a tablet. I've messed around with his tablet in Procreate, and it is very awesome stuff. It's almost like the pre-AI, artificial intelligence, because you can draw with a stylus in Procreate, and it'll smooth your lines for you. It'll turn it into vector art for you. So if you're looking for that kind of hand-drawn feel to your logo or graphics, I would recommend investing in it if you have enough of that on your plate to justify spending the money on the tablet and the software and stuff like that. But he uses it religiously, and some of the stuff he does is amazing with it. So yes, I think it's beneficial, and I think it has its place in our industry.
Sean, I think you just gave me another idea for a podcast, because I know Dane uses a pen. I don't know 100% what he uses, but that might be another topic that would be great to go down as you really get into the artistic side of designing logos or anything if you're doing like more of a retail brand. So thank you for that, and thanks for that answer, because I think anything you can do to kind of set yourself up for future advancement is always great. Now, do you happen to know if it decreases production time for art or creation time? Skip, do you know if it like goes faster for you versus with mouse?
What part? I'm sorry.
Using a pen.
So I've used it very, very, very slightly with anything that I've used to produce. I'm actually kind of old school. I've even taken it as far as, if somebody wants something that looks hand drawn, I'll go as far as, this is going to sound really weird, and people are going to be like, are you insane? Like, this is nuts. And this is years ago. This is, not anything recent. I would take black sign vinyl, and I would stick a piece of it down to a piece of plexiglass, and I would cut designs with an X-Acto knife to either use for decals, or then take the cut piece of vinyl and scan it on my scanner and bring it into my software, because cutting black vinyl gives you a super clean line versus using a black Sharpie and scanning it, because then you got a lot of cleanup and stuff like that. So yeah, I've done some pretty weird things to get that hand drawn feel. But like I said, that was years ago, prior to Procreate and all of these stylus and tablet ways to generate. I don't use it often enough to give you a solid answer as far as does it slow down production or speed it up. Now, my buddy that uses it, he's a whiz at it. He's super quick and he's amazing. So on his end, it probably speeds up his production. On my end, it would probably slow me down at this point, because I'm not that proficient in it.
You'd have to become the expert in using the pen, I'm sure, for it to really start to make sense for you. So after we have talked about design, next comes application, and you're the man that finds solutions. So what is the recommendation to those that maybe get frustrated when they have to go through a troubleshooting moment, or don't look at finding solutions or troubleshooting as a blessing in a way? And the reason why I say blessing is because you don't know what you don't know until you have to go through that process, right? So advice on the troubleshooting journey, because you've already talked numerous times about finding solutions. You just gave one about using black vinyl, right? And a tip that you're going to have smoother edges with that versus a Sharpie. So thoughts on troubleshooting?
Well, let's start with troubleshooting. Like, if you're having application issues, it's let's say it's not working the way the instructions on the Stahls website tells you to use. First thing we look at is your press or machine, for that matter, any machine, is it operating the way it should be? Is your temperature correct? Is your pressure correct? Is your time correct? Now, your readouts can read that your time and temperature and pressure and everything are what they're supposed to be, but that doesn't mean they are. I just had a conversation with somebody this morning about time and pressure. Old presses that you've used over and over again, that pressure is going to be different than someone that's bought a brand new press. Yes, it's still going to read 4, but an older press is probably going to be less than what's showing on 4 than a new press. It's been worked in. It's got lots of hours in it. So, we have to adjust our time and temp and pressure maybe slightly depending on an application issue. Design issues, we've kind of talked about that, is I try to think beforehand before we design and figure out if there's going to be any elements of the design that are troublesome prior to even getting to production, or worry about it at that point. Because at that point, you're just going to drive yourself crazy, because we probably should have crossed that bridge prior to being at the production standpoint. But trial and error are your best friends. Don't be afraid to try new things. Just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it can't be done, or doesn't mean that it won't work. People are like, oh, well, it says you can't layer this and this. Most of those instructions were submitted and put on the website prior to all of this layering that we're seeing going on now. Yes, it gives you what you can layer on what, and the time and temp to layer this on this and this. But with the advent of the Ultra Color Max and this flock and foam phenomenon with creating your own emblems, it's pretty wide open as far as troubleshooting your issue, because that issue may not have ever been there prior to going down the road of layering and stuff like that. And I always tell people, take my info as a baseline. Don't take it as gospel, because my touch and feel of hand is going to be different than your touch and feel of hand. So I set my press one way, take that as the baseline, but you have to run your own tests. And that's what the conversation I had with another person this morning was. They were having issues with Ultra Color Max not sticking to foam or flock prior to it going directly on the hat. And he actually hit me back an hour later after we talked, and he said he knocked out all 24 that he needed with no issues after we had spoke. So we solved this problem.
Yep.
And it was a simple problem, and it was nothing that he was doing wrong. It was just something that he hadn't thought of to kind of remedy the situation. And I think that's a big thing too, is people in general rely on what other people say as cut and dry. That's the way, if that's the way he does it and it works great, that's the way it should be done. Not necessarily. I think everybody's going to have their own way to troubleshoot.
Sure.
Solutions may be a little narrower than the troubleshooting. But a trial and error, you're always going to mess stuff up. I had an order for, 70 hats, and I was having issues with Permatwill, custom made Permatwill logos. So I haven't reached out to Stahls about this issue yet because I had found a solution myself to get the job out that I was confident with, but I still think there was an issue with the emblems that came to me. So I need to talk to somebody to see if there was an issue. I've retained a couple, but I was able to sort it out so I get the job done and confident enough in the application that they weren't going to come off or whatever. So I still have issues with stuff that I'm working on. So don't ever get frustrated. If this is what you want to do, you're going to deal with that frustration till the end of days. It's never going to become. And there was a quote that I heard recently that was like, and I'm going to get this wrong because I didn't write it down and I wanted to write it down, and then I forgot. It was like, professionals practice enough to where they don't get it wrong, and amateurs only practice enough. I shouldn't have even started because I knew I was going to mess up. But basically saying you want to work hard enough to where there's no issue to screw up, not work hard enough to where you're confident that you might not screw up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to put the time in, and I'm fairly confident in what I do and what I produce. And on like the sign aspect of it, I still do a lot of vinyl for vehicles, fleet vehicles, storefronts, and stuff like that. And people always laugh when I go on site to install, the people that are there. I never take extras with me. I don't cut anything extra. I'm confident in my ability. And it's not being cocky. It's not being. You have to be confident in your ability before you start, advertising your wares and your services and stuff like that. But when I go lay vinyl, I cut what I need. And yeah, it's bit me a couple times. I get on site and I screw something up, and I got to go home. I got to come back and stuff like that. But I really think, and that goes back to pre-production. I really think if it's well thought out and your application process is there and it's solid, you stand a better chance to succeed than somebody that's just willy-nilly picking materials without looking at what other people are using those materials for, and why do you use this material versus this material, which is always a big topic when people are contacting me. Why do you use this versus this, or why are you using block on this instead of foam as the base? So it's a big umbrella that holds a lot of stuff underneath it.
So guess what? We got the quote. Amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong.
That's it.
That's so true. I was actually having this conversation with my husband the other day. He was like, well, what can people still learn? If they're decorating apparel, don't they know how to do everything? And no, they don't, because our industry is constantly evolving. There's always new materials. There's always more and more textile combinations that are being put into our industry, and we have to find a solution on how to decorate them to stay up with retail trends. Then you got equipment, then you got a variety of different transfers. And just like you said, what works for you is not always going to work for the other person. And that goes in business and in production. So I think it's super, super important to always be learning. You can learn something, even if you think you know it all. I guarantee you there is something out there that you can learn that you'll go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And that's learning, right? Is understanding and thinking of new ways to do things.
Yeah, and I think also as a side point to that too, we talked about it the other day, is and no disparaging anybody in the group or anybody that contacts me. You have a lot of crafters and side hustlers that want to take this to the next level.
Yep.
But a lot of the crafters and side hustlers goes back to design software, not having that at your fingertips. Let's face it. I used the term robot the other day when we were talking. I can train anybody to pull the handle down on a press.
Yep.
Okay. If that's all you want to do is order pre-made transfers and pull the handle down and press shirts, and that's what you want to do, that's awesome. That's fine if it works for you or whatever. But if you really, really, really want to make this a business, profitable business, you got to take those extra steps to better yourself along with bettering your business platform, what your business offers. Because I spoke with somebody a couple weeks ago that wanted to know, something as simple as, how do I outline my graphic for my flock or my foam base? Because my graphic was going to be Ultra Color Max, but I have to generate the background in shop on my plotter. We cut all that stuff yourself. Now I know Stahls will cut the foam and the flock for you as a service as well. And this person's response was, I don't cut HTV. I don't have a plotter. And I said, what do you mean you don't have a plotter? They're like, I don't have a plotter. I don't even have a Cameo or anything like that versus a commercial cutter. We strictly run a business that utilizes pre-made transfers, plastisol transfers, and stuff like that, which I found very odd that in the business we're in, you don't have a plotter that far into owning your business, or even want one to be able to use. So I think there's, when I use the term robot, I think it just depends on where you want to be in your business. If you're okay with order transfers and that's your niche, is that you're just selling pre-made transfers and you're pressing them, whether it be an event or designing on Transfer Express website and getting plastisol transfers, and you're not doing anything in-house, so be it. But I think that limits you as far as what business you can then bring in on top of what you're already bringing in.
And it's not even, it doesn't even have to be new business customers,
business,
right? It could just be new business within your existing customers, just because you were able to unlock the potential to take it next level with what you can decorate with, which is a perfect transition into innovation. So you guys, if you are not in the Heat Press for Profit group, I stress this every time we have a podcast. It is a group on Facebook, and Skip, I think you post every day, which I think is fantastic. And if it's not every day, you at least see a post a couple of times a week. And he shares what he has been able to create, or if he's tried something new, or it's just really different than what somebody else down the street or several miles over is creating. And this gives people in that group the ability to really think outside the box and make that connection with, oh my gosh, I can do this, or this is something that I could easily do on my silhouette. Like, I have a silhouette right here and I can still cut the majority of the material that I can get that is CAD cut through Stahls. I also have a roll in GS24 that is behind my monitor. So I've got two different options, but the point is you can get it done when you have the right equipment. And you are taking Ultra Color Max, which is direct to film, and layering it on top of flock to give dimension, to give a little bit of texture as the outline that you talked about. You're layering it on top of soft foam. And then you're also taking multiple layers of either material and going 5, 6 deep to really create a patch or an emblem that's not a patch or an emblem that you have to order through Stahls that we produce and send to you. You're making them yourself. And I think that speaks volumes to what you can do from a branding expert. So where did you get this idea? And is it just one of those things where you're like me and you go, let's see if it sticks? Because I'm that person.
Yeah, so the whole Ultra Color Max on the flock slash foam was last winter, actually last summer of 2022, spring of 2022.
Yeah.
I had a brewery that I've been trying to get their business forever. And through a mutual friend, like I've been trying to get their business. And finally, their marketing person reached out to me and said, "Hey, let's start with a couple small things, see how well your stuff does." And they wanted, I should have prepared a little bit more and grabbed. Let me see if I have it here.
I was gonna say otherwise, post it in the Heat Press for Profit group. I
So,
send everybody there.
so they wanted to tag the back or the side right next to the buckle of their hats, because the logo we were doing on their hats was an image, but it didn't have their brewery name, no information or anything like that. So they wanted just the big icon, but then they wanted a logo on the side. But they wanted like a tag, almost like a woven tag that you see that wraps around and they sew it around on the bottom of shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I originally reached out to Stahls to see if they could custom print me the design in white on black soft foam. Now, it was an issue with not being able to print white on black, which I get, but they took the time, a couple days, to take my artwork and to do some tests, and they ultimately came back and said we can't do it on this scale because I think there were 3/4 of an inch by 1.25 inches. I have these are the tags that we did, that finished product. So you can see,
Yeah,
they're very, very small on the side of the hat. So I had a pending Ultra Color Max order that had to be submitted. And it was just a random idea. I said, well, what if the Ultra Color Max will hold a detail that small, then realistically there should be no issue with making these. It really wasn't like, ooh, is it going to work? Am I going down the rabbit hole here that is not going to pan out? Pretty confident because I had taken some HTV, some eco film, which everybody knows I love eco film, and I tested it on the flock while the Ultra Color Max was being processed and sent to me. I threw some logos on my gang sheet, and when I got them in, it was like it should have been done all along. It's like, how is nobody doing this or thinking about this or whatever? And ultimately, that's how it came about, was a need for something that wasn't available, that couldn't be available at the time. Especially, I know there's printable soft foam now, but I still don't think we still can't do white on black. So you're
right.
limited still, even though there's printable soft foam. And I will tell you, after doing that first webinar with Josh, where obviously there was pictures of this and I'd posted about these and stuff like that prior to the webinar. And it's funny because when we did the webinar, we were supposed to do the webinar 2 years prior to that and got shut down because of COVID. We had a date set and I was going to travel and go to Masontown, go to Stahls. And obviously, if it would have happened then, it would have been a whole different conversation about decorating hats. And it just so happens that it got delayed. In the meantime is when the custom tags came about. And after that first webinar, I joked with Josh about you better check your sales for flock and foam afterwards. I was like, because I want a piece of that action, because I'm sure your sales just bumped big time. And you cannot get on the Heat Press for Profit page now without seeing somebody layering either HTV onto flock or foam, or Ultra Color Max onto flock and foam, or doubling up flock. Foam's a little bit different story to layer on its own because it tends to shrink with multiple heating. So you can't cut stuff the same size and pack it on top of each other, because each time you hit it gets smaller and smaller. But it was out of necessity. I learned from the sign businesses, you don't tell a customer no, even if you don't know how you're going to do it. You tell them yes, and then you figure out how to do it. And that's what we did with these. And then they love the tags so much on the hats that they have beer festivals in the wintertime in Michigan. They've been asked for years by customers to have gloves with logos on it. So then that's when I was like, we can use these same tags, especially with the flock, because it is more of a material-based feel than the foam. And we put them on the cuffs of the gloves, and they were a hit. So, I mean, and now it's like, I want to say it's like the newest innovation in the decorating world for hats and stuff like that we've seen in the last 2 years.
Yep. It really is, because then you're able to use resources that you already have around you. Cutters, plotters, honestly, they are not that expensive when you think about the ROI that you can get from those pieces of equipment. Especially, this is going to sound, it's funny, Vicky always says that it sounds like a dinosaur eating a trash can. It's not the prettiest sound, but the point is you can get it done. And if you need a quicker production time, go to a larger cutter and you can pop what you need out in a much faster time. But the cool thing is, you said, how do I do this? And I need to find a way, versus just going, you know what? I don't know how this can be done, or thinking about the production time of, oh, this is going to take way too long to do. Can you do it or not? Because if you can do it, then you need to count for the production time, right? To build those transfers. That should be in your cost, especially because you're creating something that is unique, right? It's not something that everybody is doing. And that's going to set you out as an apparel decorator then,
And also, one of the other driving factors of these tags was I needed something that I didn't have to wait production time from Stahls to make and deliver to me. I needed a way that I could produce these in-house, change the colors of them. And now, obviously, I'm still ordering Ultra Color Max, but, to load up 30 of these in white and 30 of them in black, and then alternate the colors of the flock, in the process done here in the shop, that's minimal. You know what I mean? Right. And now with Ultra Color Max shipping the next day and stuff like that, it's almost a no-brainer to get into it. And with the dimension that the flock and the foam give, that's just added bonus to Ultra Color Max. I mean, Ultra Color Max by itself on hats looks awesome, but you back it with a piece of foam or a piece of flock just to give that a little bit extra, like Josh always says, higher perceived value. You can get another $2 out of a hat by giving them. And I've given people choices. I've said, look, here's the flat version, just Ultra Color Max. Then here's the dimensional version. Here's the difference in your cost. And 9 times out of 10, they go with the one that has the dimension on it, because it just has that extra wow factor. And even pre-COVID, 5 years ago, you couldn't do full color on hats.
Yeah.
Well, I take that back, because you could use some other the CAD prints.
Yep. Printable
options, to soft opaque and stuff like that to accommodate those full colors. And you still can. Those are still awesome products and stuff like that. Yeah. But the versatility of the Ultra Color Max in the end,
it's just extreme. Yeah.
Wins overall.
So because you do last kind of touch is because you do a lot of decoration or branding in your niche. How did you come to find out that having a niche was more profitable or better for your business to really kind of hone in on that?
I kind of lucked into it. I'll be honest with you. I had a local client that was a high-end interior painter for homes. His company is called Ultimate Custom Painting. I was doing his trucks, doing his clothing, but he was bass fishing on a tournament trail on the East Coast, and he says one of my clients or one of my sponsors doesn't have an apparel place, but they want to start getting apparel. This is 2016. And I said, sure, got their contact information, ultimately ended up signing a licensing agreement with them to produce their apparel and to sell their apparel via my website directly to their customers. They didn't want to spend thousands of dollars to stock clothing. They wanted to focus on what they make. They didn't want to deal with clothing, but they still wanted to offer clothing. So I created a page on my website to host all of their apparel. They gave me free reign to pick apparel that was trendy, that wasn't their wheelhouse, it was mine.
Sure.
So they gave me the freedom to use their logo and put it on different things. So fast forward, since 2016, well, 7, 8 years in, that one standalone job or licensing agreement has now turned into like 80% of my business. Not necessarily strictly through them, which I'm still dealing with them. Our dynamic has changed a little bit. I still sell some of their stuff on my website, but they have some of the stuff on their website. And when somebody orders through them, they email me the order. I still produce, I still drop ship.
Got it.
But it trickles down. Your niche is what gets you there.
Yeah.
But so bass fishermen were buying stuff from me, my website, for that company's logos on it. Well, then they would then reach out to me and say, hey, I have another sponsor. I have another one of my fishing sponsors that doesn't have apparel, that wants apparel. Can I give them your contact info? Sure. So then I get another fishing company, and then it snowballs.
Yeah.
So like I said, we're 7 or 8 years later, and now on my website, there's 10 to 15 different businesses that I sell for, that I produce on demand, drop ship. But then also on the flip side of that, some of these fishermen own their own businesses.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, I need apparel for my own business. And we know your quality. We know your work. We know your turnaround time. So would you be interested in doing stuff for us? Or, hey, I'm part of a bass fishing club. Our club wants apparel. So
Right.
then I produce for the clubs. We do either pre-sale or I put it up on my website. And that just generates, because then another person from the club gets stuff that might not have got stuff from me other ways. And they own a business, or they know a business that wants apparel done and stuff like that. And your products speak volumes. You produce good stuff. You produce stuff that lasts, that has longevity, and like that. That's ultimately what gets you your word of mouth, is quality products that people can count on. But no, so my niche was bass fishing, and it still is, but that encompasses now the bass fishermen and then their world.
Yep.
Like their own personal worlds or other places and stuff like that. And people that just know them, like, hey, that's a cool hat you're wearing. Where did you get it? Oh, D4 Graphics did it. Well, then that person is like, well, can I get their contact info? So it like spider webs out like crazy. And to go from it being a one-time licensing deal to now equating to 75 to 80% of my annual business is just, it's crazy. And even my wife is like, I still don't understand why these people don't go local to where they live to get stuff done. They come to you. Well, it's because they bought stuff
Yep.
from me that I've produced, and they're not worried about if they're going to get crap or if they're going to get something other than what's mocked up or shown to them. I hear horror stories about, oh, I ordered this stuff online and It wasn't anything that it looked like in the mock-ups, and it was horrible, and the shirts were felt like cardboard and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's been crazy, especially in that bass fishing world. Which, and everybody, somebody the other day hit me up on Facebook Messenger, was asking questions, and I told them that story, and they're like, "Oh, and all along we assumed that you were like an avid fisherman. That's how you have all these fishing contacts and produce all this fishing stuff." Nope, not so much.
Definitely not.
I happened to luck into an industry that needed a void filled. And I would like to think that to some degree, my name and my company name in the bass world is synonymous with each other, because I've got enough stuff out there and have produced enough stuff across the board that people seek me out, especially for the hats. But I do other apparel, like, the polyester sun shirts for these fishermen and stuff like that, as well. And that goes back to what you said earlier, is I do post a lot, but I don't post stuff that like I'm not gonna post my 200 shirt order that was done with Goof Proof,
Right.
because that's there's there's nothing cool and unique about um, a one color Goof Proof on a t-shirt. I mean, awesome, you got a 200 shirt order, and that's what you need, to get going and stuff like that. But you don't see those kind of posts from me, because that's not what I'm here to share. I'm here to share the new cool innovations or thinking outside the box, which I think by this point that everybody assumes I'm not going to post regular t-shirts that I print. And I still do that stuff, but you just don't see it.
But so I think the biggest thing to kind of take away from this is quality, right? Creates trust with those customers. And then from there, that trust gives them the ability to spread your name, right? And because you're creating unique products that are also quality, that's super intriguing, and other people want your stuff. So you've got the funnel that all begins with really thinking about a quality product, and quality is going to come with troubleshooting and really figuring out what's going to be best for your business. One last thing, is there anything you would like to tell somebody in terms of just sticking with your business after being in the industry for more than 20 years, saying we're going to count sign business as well?
Um, it's it's okay to stay working from home. I'm 14 years in, and I still work out of my basement. I have friends that have known me forever that are like, "Ah, you need a storefront. Why are you still working in your basement?" It's low overhead. You know what I mean? Like, and honestly, too, if I would have had a storefront when COVID hit, it probably would have put me out of business, because I did not have all those extra added expenses, rent, internet, electric, at a brick and mortar shop. So don't feel like you can't be professional and you cannot produce professional grade apparel and products by working from your house. I get that a lot. Why aren't you in a storefront? Whatever. You know how much more money you'd make. Well, you don't know that,
Yeah.
because you're not in the business, and you can't assume anything anymore. But on top of that is you just have to, everybody has bad days. Everybody screws up jobs. Things don't go the way they need to go. It's going to happen. It's going to happen all the time. It's going to happen next week. It's going to happen the week after. You got to roll with it, and you got to learn from it. I like to think that I've learned more in the last 14 years than I have in my previous 30 years of existence or whatever. And I'm a one-man show. I've been a one-man show. So I spend days by myself in my basement, which, sometimes that's good. Sometimes you start talking to yourself at the end of the day.
I
But
know how that feels.
sometimes when you talk to yourself, that's when things pan out, and that's when you start to innovate and stuff like that. I can be in the middle of pressing a job, and then something I'm doing with that job makes me think about another job I got coming down the pipeline about, oh, well, maybe if I change this aspect of it, it'll go quicker, or I can make more money, or I can streamline a little bit more. So my mind's always turning. I'm sure the wife doesn't like it too, because afterwards I'm upstairs, I'm on my phone, I'm answering questions on Facebook Messenger, and she's like, do other people not have lives? Like, you sit up here and I'm like, hey, if people want to message me, I'll hit them back and give them the best answer I can. But no, I think it's a conglomeration of everything we talked about today to be successful. Is you got to put yourself out there, you got to take chances, you got to take the risks, and if you do it long enough, it'll pay off. You gotta grind, you gotta keep going, and if you don't have the wherewithal to do that, it might not be what you're meant to do. I kind of lucked out. My parents had a similar business for many years prior to me getting into it, but even before that, my mom and dad both worked at the local newspaper where I grew up. My mom was a typesetter, my dad was a pressman. And my mom was a very good artist, very good hand drawing artist. She comes from the old school of painting letters onto storefronts before vinyl was a thing. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. I got my mom's design ability and business sense, but I also got my dad's mechanical production sense and stuff like that. And I think that may be the biggest thing I see with people not succeeding, is them thinking, I'm going to buy a press and I'm going to buy a hat press and I'm going to turn it into a business.
Yeah.
That's where my robot comments come into play, is that yes, anybody can go out and buy a hat press. Anybody can buy flex style patches. Anybody can stick flex style patches onto hats. You're only going to go so far if all you're doing is that type of business. You may stay in business, but you might not grow the way other people are going to grow that have a design background or want to learn how to design to offer their customers more than just the standard cookie cutter products that we see. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just depends on which avenue you want to go, and if you want to be more custom. And like when we talked the other day, even after 14 years, I still consider myself more of a boutique than I do. I don't know what the alternate term to boutique would be, but I chased those high volume jobs when I first got into business because I thought that's where the money was at. But you'd be very hard pressed to catch me behind the press of a 300 or 400 t-shirt job right now, because my time is better spent with the smaller run, higher profitable jobs than it is standing in front of a press for hours knocking out $7 t-shirts.
Yeah.
So you got to decide where you want to be. If you're fine with sitting in front of a press knocking out hundreds of shirts daily, and you're just being a robot and doing that, that's cool if that's what you want to do. I like the higher end, higher cost, higher profit jobs. They might not be hundreds of pieces, but the time spent to produce is going to yield me a higher profit than sitting behind 400 t-shirts at the end of the day.
Right. And taking more time to create them as well.
Yep.
Skip, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. For those of you that are listening and tuning in, he is also available for contract work as well as consultations. So, Skip, how can people reach out to you? Where can they follow you? How can they get in contact?
You can hit me up on Facebook Messenger, either through my personal account or my business page, which is D4 Graphics. I have both set up. I have people that contact me both ways. Some people like to go the business route because they don't want to, intrude on my personal page, but my personal page is flooded with business work. My email address is skip at the letter D, the number 4, and then graphics, graphics.com. You can always shoot me an email. And my website also has my phone number on it. So, I'm not opposed to text messages. Just if you text me late at night and I respond, you might need to follow up the next day because I'll probably forget that you texted me late at night. But anyway, anybody wants to reach out, I'm open all the way around. Email, Facebook, text, do what you got to do. Doesn't matter to me.
All of it. I love it. Well, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in and staying with us through this session. This is definitely a little bit longer, but hopefully you were able to get a book of notes, of tips and tricks that Skip was able to provide. So you guys have a great Friday and even better weekend. And Skip, thank you so much again. We'll see you next
thank you for the invite.
What'd you say?
I said thanks for the invite.
Oh my gosh, of course. Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a good weekend.